Hey guys, so today you and I are going to talk about lead engineers and tech strategies. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, Frederick, as a lead software engineer, how do you devise your technical strategy to understand and implement a feature? I use my experience to set up a list of to-dos or action points that I need to take in order to assess what is necessary. That sounded very fluffy, so I'll try to break it down into something more concrete. So this is one of those cases where the juniors, you can sort of just listen in, but you won't probably get much. I hope you will get something from it, but this is one of those boring ones when I say that experience is the answer. It's the real answer. How do you know how to devise a technical strategy? Experience. You have worked so long that, and this is something that a junior developer cannot do. And this is the difference that I tell people. This is the difference between a junior and a senior, or a mid-level and a senior. A person or anybody like a junior and a mid-level, etc., etc., you have to do some living in order to know what's going to work and what's not going to work. You're going to have some failures in your career, and I have had plenty of those, and that translates into experience. So when I devise a technical strategy, I have a few touch points that I always do in order to figure out what's going to work and what's not going to work. The first and primary thing that has to happen before I know what I'm going to do is that I need to have an understanding of my ecosystem. I need to do some listening first and foremost. And when I do listening, I don't mean that I sit and just listen to people randomly talk. I have directed questions that I use as triggers, as I like to call them. I have my trigger questions that, in a similar way, it's sort of how police officers or people who do investigations, they have certain techniques and questions. It usually is questions to get people to talk, and that's what I want. I want to hear the thoughts of my stakeholders. And I can't spend I can't learn everything about their private lives or anything like that. That's not what I'm looking for. What I'm trying to get a hold of is, who are they? What do they value? And what is the long-term vision and short-term vision of the project? Long-term and short-term, both are very necessary, so that I know what I need to make and what needs to happen right now, very quickly. And I know what's going to have what they want long term, because both of those perspectives are very necessary for me to formulate a good strategy for how to implement features, set up a good work process, etc., etc. And then the value system comes in figuring out, okay, what do they care about? Do they care about quality? Do they care about delivery speed? Do they care about developer happiness? Do they care about tooling? Do they care, or this is a fun one that a lot of team leads or tech leads don't really think about. Do they care about the prestige within the company? Do they want a software team that is innovative and has like a really nice internal company brand, etc., etc.? I want to figure out what they want. In a similar way how a salesperson or a marketing person or something like that wants to understand the customer. I want to understand my stakeholder, because that is my customer. My real customer. And when I have done so, I take a look at the code, and I do what I call the code inventory. Well, it's not just code; it's the technical inventory. It's the same thing as if you were. Imagine if I told you you're going to be in charge of this gigantic warehouse of a bunch of stuff, and you are responsible for making sure that you're of deliveries and like storage and like all that stuff. Well, the first person anybody who's ever worked in logistics is going to do, the first thing, literally, is to go and check the ledgers and then make sure that those ledgers are correct. Do inventory. Go through the entire damn stock and just check, how much of everything do I have? Where is everything? So I know, because it's my responsibility to know where everything is, so that I can get out the right boxes when the trucks are coming, or etc., etc. Coding is exactly the same thing. If you are the lead engineer, you are going to be the main touch point between every single person in the entire company and the code base and the team, if you have a team and so forth. It is your responsibility, your primary responsibility, to be able to answer questions related to your system. That is the number one thing that you are responsible for doing. And that's why I tell people that you don't really have to be a master programmer to be an engineering lead, or like a lead software engineer in a team, or a tech lead, or whatever you want to call it. It really comes down to having domain knowledge. That's all it really is, for the most part, being able to answer questions. So that's my second second thing to do. Go through all the code, check, okay, what is the stack, what tech are we, what packages are we using, what libraries are we using, what practices are being applied, are we doing, how are things structured, what's the general health sensation I get from the code base, where are most of the issues, what are the features, what third-party systems are we using, what hosting solutions, etc. So I just go through the entire ecosystem. I like to call it that I start looking for my fence, because I have this analogy that I use when I lead a team, where I say that my team, or and all the stuff that I need in order to deliver software for the company, is my herd of sheep, and my job is to create a fence around all of those sheep. And the reason why I want to create a fence is because the fence just represents a good work process, and that is a different video. But basically, I know that as a sheep herder, as anybody who's doing that sort of stuff will be able to tell you, that as long as the sheep and all the stuff that is related to the software development process is within the pen, it's a little pen with just a very rickety fence around it. As long as everything is happening within there, I know that I'm going to get out my software, or my wool, if that's the way I like to call it. And that's why I don't really focus as much on micromanaging, or I don't have to care so much about each individual sheep or so forth. I just need to make sure that they're all inside the pen, because as long as they're all inside the pen, I have I can control the output, and that is the thing that is why the code, everything from, if we have dependent teams, people we depend on in order to do our work, etc. So it ties into so many things to get that holistic understanding of, this is my sphere of influence, if that makes sense. This is the stuff that matters in order to for us to deliver on the end goals that I've already figured out by talking to my stakeholders. And then when I've done the code interview, or the technical inventory, I start by creating a technical roadmap. It's basically a gigantic to-do list. I just write down, okay, in order to achieve these goals, I'm going to need A, B, C, D. I'm going to have to check this, and then I just continue. Just write every single thing down in a gigantic list. And then when I have that gigantic list, I sort it based on usually what is short term, the stuff that needs to happen immediately, because it's really dangerous, so it's very important that we start working on that immediately. And then I also make sure that I take a look at what is it that my stakeholders care about right now, right here, right now. And then when I've sorted it based on relevancy and general understanding of what's important at this moment, I present it to my stakeholders, and I say, I'm thinking we're going to do this, and I motivate, why are we going to do this? We're going to do it this, we're going to do A, B, and C, because A, B, and C are very important. It's going to make this happen, etc., etc. And I just kind of walk through the short-term stuff to start off with, and then I take a section where I talk about the long-term strategies, and sort of this is what I believe that the vision is. And when I have a general agreement from my stakeholders that they say that, yeah, this seems to be sort of relevant, I start implementation. I start converting stuff into story cards and so forth, and create a backlog of stuff. And then the process of software development starts. And this can be done when you set up an entire team, or it can be done when it's basically the same process. When you just create a specific feature, or if you're going to do a long-term project or something like that. So what I want you to take away from this is that the way that I devise my strategy is, boringly enough, experience. Usually I have a few key things that I always do. Number one is I listen first and foremost to all my stakeholders, because I need to figure out what the values of my stakeholders are, what they care about, what is the long-term vision, the short-term vision, risks, etc., etc., things that they care about, get their thoughts on how things are and what they would like. That's it. Get to know your customer, if that makes sense. Second thing is do inventory. Go through your code. What is the state of the code? Go make sure that you know where all the third-party systems are, how the work processes are working, what people are working in the teams, etc., etc. You need to have a good understanding of your environment, basically. That is what it comes down to. And that is your primary responsibility as the lead engineer. Third, go and make yourself a to-do list. And just list out all the things all the steps that needs to happen. Checklists. I love checklists. They are the most powerful tool humans have ever come up with. And just go through until you can't really think of anything else. Then sort that list based on relevancy, based on the situation, what is most going to make the most difference. Present it to your stakeholders, and so that they sort of know what you're thinking that you're going to do, and then get their feedback on it. And then when you feel like, yeah, people seem to be sort of agreeing with this, go into implementation mode. This works really well, and yeah, that's pretty much my process at the very least. Have a great day.